Here we are once again at Web Summit. You are all looking extremely blue. Is that because you're depressed, or is everybody happy? Is everybody happy?
Yay!
Yeah, it's just for lighting. You're all wonderful humans. And talking of wonderful humans, we're going to talk about how blockchain can create an inclusive society. And so we have two wonderful humans right in front of us. So we have Marieke, we have Lacey. Now, blockchain and inclusive society. Some people would suggest that, using blockchain to create an inclusive society, when all I see is lots of parties with, let's just say, white men, that's not very inclusive. Crypto bros are a thing, we know that. But I've seen a lot of projects in blockchain. I've been writing about blockchain for many years, for Data Economy, for Grit Daily, for other publications, and I do see a lot of movement in terms of inclusion, diversity, equality. Not necessarily in the people that are making the products, and that needs to change and improve, but certainly in terms of the intention of the blockchain solutions. Before we get into what's coming next and what you think is important, maybe you could give us some idea of your idea of the blockchain projects and how blockchain has already started to take us towards inclusion. Marieke?
Yeah, sure. And I think actually, thanks for starting with that question. Diversity and inclusion, hugely important. To give a couple of stats, a month and a half ago, we were actually in Lisbon having NearCon, a conference with 3,000 people, and 38% were women. And we had 176 countries represented. And that's diversity and inclusion, right? How can you actually have a fair representation and people who want to participate? To do that, you need to have actually technologies that are simple to understand so that people feel that they can participate and that it's okay. And the other thing also is that we here speak English and we might think that everybody in the world speaks English. That's not true. And so thinking through translating and having local communities who can be empowered, that's also how it can help. Diversity and inclusion matters because we all have our biases, and if we're building stuff that only a certain group build, then it's not going to be actually usable for everybody. So I think it's hugely important, and at Near we focus on simplicity, so to enable more people and more projects to be able to actually come on that front.
Excellent, thank you so much, Marieke. Lacey?
Yeah, that's great. To build on what Marieke said just now, in terms of, in your question, blockchain is sort of a bias reducer or preventer. The data show us that we tend to prefer folks that look like us. This is something that just feeds into implicit bias and leads to structural inequality in terms of female participation in things like tech, in things like traditional finance, in sort of any number of verticals that have traditionally looked a certain way. And so what is really cool and really exciting to me about blockchain, and especially with some of the use cases that are coming out now, real world utility, is what that could mean and how that could change things like the application process for jobs, or things like the application process for school. And starting with I want to see and understand what you've built before I know anything demographically about you, and maybe have people actually in a simple, easy to understand way say, okay, yes, here's a project, I can basically contribute something similar and be evaluated based on what they've contributed, instead of, okay, what's your name? Okay, do you look like me or not? Like, if we can start with the data, and that's really what blockchain starts to scratch the surface of, as it's becoming more and more user-friendly to be built for tools. This is really exciting to me. I think it's going to open a lot of things up.
I mean, when I look at the makeup of most teams, it upsets me. I mean, I think a lot of people who follow my writing, my social media, they know that I'm battling all the time for diversity, equality, and inclusion. And I don't talk about it from an ethical or moral standpoint. I talk about it from a financial standpoint. When I think of teams, I'll give you an example. I was in Kyiv judging a startup competition. They had basically what was a really big DJI drone. It was an air taxi, two-person air taxi. And when it got to the judges' questions, I couldn't grab the microphone quick enough. I said, you don't have a woman on your design team, do you? And they said, no, how did you know? And I said, well, because you designed the entrance for people who wear trousers. I challenge you to put on a skirt and get into that in the first place. And don't even get me started on if you're in a wheelchair. If we build products, solutions, whether it's hardware, software, whatever, and we have a diverse team, those are more likely to be designed for billions of people rather than a few million, but wear trousers. But I look at the blockchain industry, and I'm still really disappointed that we are not moving towards teams that are diverse to build products that work for everybody. How are we going to move that forward?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's specific to blockchain only, right? I've been working for most of my career in tech and in finance, and actually those two industries are also not fairly representative of what's going on. I think we can make a change, and for example, I'm going to preach for my own church here, but when I look at actually Near and the ecosystem of Near, we are seeing a change, and that comes from actually, raising up why does it matter and how can you participate. And it also comes from actually, honestly, having role models, right? So if we're very strong in building local communities in Vietnam, in Kenya, like having people who, don't know how to code but can still participate, because that's also the reality. Blockchain, and actually to get to the next wave of mass adoption, we also need to move beyond just having builders. Of course, developers are extremely important, but it's more than that you need to have real adoption, right? You need 360 of every company. And to your point, the more different views you have, the more your product has a chance of actually being adopted and being understood. So, role models are extremely important. Having also like a pathway for people to understand. And we have to de-jargonize. All those terms that are honestly not understandable. If a 3-year-old cannot understand what you're talking about, it's a good test actually. Either your mom or your 3-year-old, if they can't understand what you're talking about, then actually the reality is nobody is going to be able to do that. So.
Yeah, Lacey, tell me what you feel about the makeup of most teams and how we can change that.
Absolutely. So prior to jumping into entrepreneurship, my most recent role was as a principal product manager at Amazon. And we saw quite frequently that if products were designed without taking a diverse perspective into account, you're not going to come up with a very good product. And so kind of a classic example was, someone searching on Amazon for nude-colored undergarments. And what do you think came up? And who do you think that audience spoke to? And it was exactly like your example, do you have any women, underrepresented minorities on your team, on this engineering team that built this protocol? No, okay, well, then you end up with something that it ends up being exclusionary inadvertently. And so the data show us, we know diverse teams are more profitable, they perform better. And so to Marique's point, if you can find role models, and it's okay, I think initially, if you're a female and you're looking for a role model that can sort of invite you to the room, that's a step. So take that step. Don't be afraid, don't self-select out just because maybe you don't see someone that looks like you. Find someone that you can sort of resonate with, whose values align with yours, and just say, hey, if you can tag along with them or be invited, and then can you bring a friend? That's the other key piece. So I think as ladies, it really is incumbent on us to sort of bring others with us as we rise. And being on stage with someone like Marieke she's a perfect example of someone that's actively doing this and stepping into that space and filling it and inviting other women to participate in a similar fashion. So we got to start now.
I mean, okay, so we're talking about the people that are building these solutions, but let's be honest, blockchain just as a technology is not inherently inclusive at this point. It's going to be hard to see, but show of hands, who's got a crypto wallet of any description? Let's see if you've got a crypto wallet. Okay, keep your hands up if you felt like you needed a PhD to open it. Yeah, exactly, and that's the problem. We go down to a store right now, and in virtually every place except where I live, where you still need cash, that's Berlin, don't ask, I just go blip and I pay for something. And I didn't need a PhD to open up a wallet, understand tokens and understand different protocols, understand this, that, and the other. Blockchain as a technology is inherently not inclusive. We're very privileged here. We're the less than 0.1% of the entire world that understands technology and is talking about this stuff all day. What about the rest of the people? How are we going to fix that problem?
Yeah, so Near is actually all about simplicity, and so our accounts, for example, are human readable, and it means that you don't need to have to remember 12 words password for opening a wallet. But more than that, we've started doing partnerships that are bringing Web 2 to Web 3, which I'm absolutely convinced that in the market that we're in, the next wave is actually going to be about mass adoption. And to get mass adoption on blockchain, we have to get out of just the Web 3 users and to get really on the onboarding for Web 2. Now, doing that, the reality is that the end user doesn't care about blockchain, and we shouldn't have to explain what it is. It should be doing something that is actually different and that actually solves a problem. So we've been working, for example, with Sweatcoin, which is an app you walk, you get sweat tokens, and actually Sweatcoin is an app that was not in the Web3 space. 120 million users, we've onboarded millions of wallets, so we have over 20 million wallets with Sweat. And now we have over 200,000 active users that are basically continuously participating participating in a new thing. What that means is that without realizing it, you're starting to be in that crypto movement, and now you're like, you can walk to earn, and you can start doing some of the things that we've been talking about. So simplicity, massively important, and the ultimate holy grail of simplicity is we don't have to talk about this technology anymore. It just works, and it does what it's promising to do.
And yeah, by the way, I've got my Sweatcoin wallet. I've been using Sweatcoin for a while. There's a couple of things I use to convert, my walking and my exercise into things. Sweatcoin is one, and Sadhu is another one, which plants trees for every step. Yeah, Lacey, where are we going with the technology? What can we do? I mean, honestly, one of the best things I ever did was open up a Crypto.com account, because I get a card that I can just load. So I can effectively load it with USDT or whatever, and then just spend the money. That's how it should be, right?
Yep, I think that's exactly right. And like Marieke said, making it really simple and user-friendly and moving. I mean, we have all of these great tools and great UX on Web 2. You port that over to Web 3 and have it be shown in ways that people are familiar with, like layouts and formats that folks will recognize. And again, no one cares about the protocol. They care that it works. Like if I send you an email, you're not going to ask me, is this SMTP or HTTP? Right. Like, no, you just want to receive my message, hopefully, and hopefully it goes through. So I think really keeping simplicity at sort of top of mind and making sure that we stick with things that are recognizable, and getting away from jargon and getting away from sort of exclusionary language, because I think there's a lot of excitement about the technology, and so people want to get into the technical details and talk about how amazing it is and the transparency and all these different things. But really, at the end of the day, to get that mass adoption and get more and more people using blockchain-enabled solutions, they've got to look familiar and they've got to be easy to use. And I think the question that still is a bit outstanding in my mind, this morning was taking a look, and there's still 7%, and this is in the United States, 7% of American adults don't use the internet. So not even Web 2 to Web 3, but there's, and that's 18 million odd people. Like, that's not immaterial. And so thinking through, like, we are in a very privileged position. So how do we invite more people to the space? How do we become more inclusive and invite people to build and even be aware that this technology is available and could do so many things, for their lives, for ownership, for building value, et cetera. Oh. So there's a ways to go on that front. I don't pretend to have the answers, but it's exciting to at least be recognizing these are the right places to start.
And you speak there about one of my favorite topics, which is who here is building a blockchain-based solution at the moment? Yeah, we got some hands up in the air. Please stop talking about blockchain. I would never run up to you and say, "Hey, do you want to look at my latest JavaScript technology project?" Right? Basically, when we launched things, when people like Uber, Lyft came about, it was you can press here and a car arrives and takes you where you want to go. We don't care what they built it on. If blockchain is the most appropriate technology to build it on, then build it on that. Yep. We don't need to know, right? And is part of this inclusion issue that we have with blockchain, because everyone's been using buzzwords and terminology in the hope that maybe private investment or that the token generation event or whatever you have to call it these days is going to go better because buzzword. Yeah. Can we just, how do we get everyone to stop talking about the technology? Because we don't do that in any other thing. We don't build apps and tell everybody how the app was built. We just say, here's the problem, here's the solution. Can we plead to everyone to stop talking about this?
But I think that's what we're going to see in this bear market. The reality of the conditions we're in right now is that a lot of the hype and the stuff that is not producing any utility, at some point it's not going to be sustainable. And so I think we're actually definitely going to see that. The other thing that I'm actually also very hopeful for is bringing on talent, right? And to your point, bringing on talent means we also need to have excellent UX. We need to have actually people who think design and people who actually think like 360 for a business, and that has to actually be inclusive. So I'm actually very optimistic. I think the conditions of the next 6, 12, and how many months, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think we're going to see actually a wave of going back into building, and therefore not having to talk about the technology, but starting to talk about actually the use cases, and that's how we get to mass adoption.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on this, Lacey?
Yep, absolutely. I think the use cases are going to be the proof points that give people something to talk about. Like your example of Uber, this is amazing, I push a button and a car comes and it takes me where I want to go. When we have some of that real world utility and sort of blockchain infrastructure that's enabling much better, much more efficient, less wasteful, more efficient, processes, procedures, then people I think are going to recognize oh, okay, I have an example, because right now, if you walk into a room and you say blockchain, people automatically think crypto, or I think you referenced crypto bros. There's just a sort of a rebrand that's sort of dying to happen, and the bear market is really going to help facilitate that. Like the projects that aren't adding value and don't have real utility beyond speculation. I was a banker for the first part of my career, so I was always a bit skeptical of like, okay, so what's the value prop? Is this an asset? Does it create an income stream for you? Explain to me this cryptocurrency bit. And if we could decouple blockchain from crypto and just talk about the potential implications of blockchain for real world utility and keeping it simple and really empowering solutions and empowering builders, I think that one or two use cases, that's what's going to start to turn the tide, and starting now this is a great time.
I mean, if I can offer an example from what I've been writing about recently, one of the apps that just didn't talk about the fact that it is underpinned by Web3. It's going to be launching an AR function soon, but they don't call it that. It's a thing called Shred Spots. Shred Spots is an app for extreme, alternate sports like skating, skateboarding, razors, BMX, etc., etc. And what people can do is they can, crowd. As a crowd, they can put where the spots are, where the rails are, where the steps are, how many, whether you're going to get busted or not, and then you can record your tricks and you put it there. The fact is, they've underpinned it with Web3 because if they cease to exist in the future, all of those are still, on the chain, and they are, therefore, that legacy is protected. And AR, they're going to do it so that, you can actually see the trick where the spot is as you move your phone around. It's kind of like almost got to catch all the tricks, like a Pokemon kind of thing. Yeah, but they don't talk about blockchain, Web3. It's all under there, but we don't need to know. They just talk about this is a cool app for people who do alternate sports. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the way it should be. That's the best example I've seen lately, because they could talk about all the technology. They don't do that. They talk about that maybe with the investors privately, but they don't talk about that in their PR, in their marketing, and in their push. And I think that's the way everybody should be going with this. So we are, unfortunately, at the end. We could talk about this all day, but we can't, because every panel is finite. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Marieke. Thank you so much, Lacey. And thank you so much, everybody here. Have a fantastic Web Summit. We'll see you soon.